Okay, I'm back. You're going to notice a new background here. What I have is I do a utility safety boot camp, and in that utility safety boot camp, I talk about the different hazards associated with working in a utility. And this is a portion of that slide that I do, and it's on the globally harmonized system for classification and labeling of chemicals. That's your GHS. So we're going to take a portion of that GHS from the utility safety, and we'll go through what that new system is, and then we're going to close up the risk management side because the only thing left are your last appendix, which was C. So it's really not much left on the risk management side. So you're going to get a nice brief overview of what this globally harmonized system of classification and labeling chemicals are. All right. The overview for your GHS. The GHS system is a standardized and harmonized labeling and classification of chemicals in a comprehensive and a logical fashion on a global scale. And in this system, it's also going to replace the way that you're going to see what these hazards are, either by new pictograms or signal words, or the big one is the new safety data sheets as opposed to material safety data sheets. In the GHS, it's going to define health hazards, what they are. It's going to define physical and environmental hazards of chemicals. It'll create a classification process that uses available data for the chemicals that are currently out there, and is for the purpose of comparison with the defined hazard criteria. So it's going to, this new system is going to look at what we already know about some chemicals, and an international group is going to compare that to say, okay, this is truly what the hazards are related to these chemicals. And then after they get that worked out scientifically, they're going to communicate the hazards and protection measures with new labels and the new SDS. The hazard classification is required by the chemical manufacturers and the importers, and it identifies the relative data regarding the hazards. It determines the chemical and its hazardous, or if it's either physical or health hazards, and then it'll give you your SDS, which is supplied by the manufacturer. So they don't, this last bullet saying it's not necessary for a manufacturer or an importer to go to every person that they sell their product to. What they do instead is they provide a SDS sheet, and in that SDS sheet would have been all the information they would have given the client on the use of their chemical. So the hazard classification, a full range of available scientific literature and evidence, shall be used to determine the classification, and you're going to see hazard class, and that hazard class is going to be the nature of the hazard, but then there's a hazard category, which is the severity of whatever that hazard class is. Physical hazards, things that could explode, it could be self-reacting, corrosive, gas under pressure, those are all types of physical damage. But type of health hazards are where it's going to give you, mutate your genes, cause cancer, it's toxic to you, toxic to water, could take out, steal away your oxygen. That's a health hazard. There's several different codes now of entities, and these are just U.S. entities that have hazard classifications. So if you're looking at the scale, and I'm going to use my mouse here to show you, this is a flash point in Celsius, this meaning 0 Celsius versus this here at 93 Celsius. If something has a flash point that it can react in temperatures from 0 Celsius to 1, react in such a way that it can be flammable, then it's highly flammable in the Consumer Product Safety Commission. EPA doesn't have that. The American National Safety Institute has a highly flammable. OSHA right to know doesn't have a highly flammable. They just say it's flammable from 0 to 41 degrees Celsius, and then from 41 on, it's combustible material. Now with your new GHS, they're looking at a boiling point and a flash point. So here's your flash point, but then if there's an additional boiling point greater than 35 degrees Celsius or less than 35 degrees Celsius, where your liquid is going to turn to vapor, much like you would imagine boiling water. When you boil water, it leaves its liquid state and goes to a gaseous state at a certain temperature. This is saying at a certain temperature, 35 Celsius. If it's higher than that, then it's highly flammable. But if it's below 35 degrees Celsius and it's also a flammable material between 0 and 23 degrees Celsius, this now is classified as extremely flammable, as opposed to over here where it's 60 degrees Celsius to 93 degrees Celsius, and this material is combustible. Now your GHS rating, in accordance to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 now is your new extremely flammable, 2 is your highly, and then 3 is your goes towards your flammable and your liquid vapor and your combustible liquid or vapor. And this is a direct change from what the American system used to think and used to see, because we used to see 4 as being the very highest hazard, as opposed to now 1 is going to be your highest hazard. So this is your new symbol for flammability, and this is the range from flammable to combustible. So now whatever item this is, once you see this pictogram, means it's flammable. But then if you see a 1, then you know it's extremely flammable. So that is where you get your signal words. Danger is a 1 or 2 versus a warning 3 or 4, where it's not as hazardous as the other thing. Now, toxic is running along the same way, but instead of using temperature Celsius, this is using a quantity in milligrams or kilograms, and your LD50 that you see on the bottom left of the screen means your lethal dose 50. Lethal dose 50 of whatever the test subject is. So if they use 100 lab rats and they expose it to whatever this chemical is at milligrams, let's say it's 10 milligrams, and out of the 100 lab rats, 50 of them die at 10 milligrams, that means it's highly toxic, and that's going to fall over here in this range. Let's say another 100 rats they're using for a second example, and after exposure of 500 milligrams of whatever that chemical is, it falls into this rate. If 50% of them die, now you're over here where it's harmful, but it's not highly toxic or toxic. It's actually going to be a little bit less. So we're going to scoot that idea into your GHS labeling. So you're looking at your concentration here on the bottom line from 0 milligrams all the way up to 5,000. And if there's half of the test subject that dies after 5,000 milligram of exposure to whatever that hazardous substance is, then it's going to be a 5, or as opposed to something dying with 0 to 5 milligrams of exposure. So that should make sense to you, meaning if there's less of a concentration that is going to kill half of the test subjects, then obviously it's highly toxic, and that is going to give you now your new number 1. So fatal is swallowed, that's your 1 or 2. Toxic is swallowed is your 3. Harmful is swallowed is 4. Maybe harmful is swallowed is your 5. and that's going to give you your new pictogram here of warning. You already have danger. 1, 2, 3 is a danger toxic condition, but then on the hazard classification for health hazard, 4 and 5 is a warning. Your new GHS labels are going to look like this. You have your identifier, and you have your signal word, danger, pictograms, a hazard statement, and then your other precaution statements. And on the very bottom is going to be your manufacturer or your distributor information. So all your labels must look like this. You can't have your identifier and then the manufacturer and distributor right underneath it, because that is not a GHS label. Your GHS label, and the purpose of the GHS, to have everything look the same no matter where the product's coming from, if it's coming from Japan or Haiti or America or Canada. All these things have to be lined up in the exact same way for continuity. Danger and warning. Danger, more severe, that's your skull and crossbone. Warning is less severe, and you'll see the exclamation point. You'll have your prevention precaution statement where it'll say danger may cause blank, and that's your precaution statement. Here are your new pictograms. You see them left to right, an explosion, your gas under pressure where it kind of looks like a paddle, but it's a gas cylinder on its side. You have your flammables and your oxidizers, which both have pictures of a flame, but the difference is your oxidizer has a 0, which is the O for oxygen, the O with a line underneath it. That's your oxidizer. Your acute toxicity on the bottom left, your corrosive to skin or may burn skin, eye damage, that's the next one, where it's the picture of the hand, then the picture of the body with the pathways going through it. That's telling you it's a health hazard. It's either going to be a carcinogen, a mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, something is toxic. Your exclamation point in this picture is telling you it's an irritant, skin sensitizer, it's acutely toxic, there's some sort of effect is going to happen. And then the last one, where you're seeing the dead tree and the dead fish, is aquatic toxicity. Your secondary containers. So first you get a big sample, or excuse me, not sample, you get a big gallon or 5 gallons of some sort of chemicals, but you only want to remove 10 milliliters in your lab or some place where you've got your chemicals that you're transporting. Now you could put that in a secondary container, so you're not using your bulk container, because in some cases you can't move a bulk container. So when you're putting your hazardous chemical into your secondary container, that hazardous chemical has to be labeled. And that 1910-1200, what you see there is 1910 is the Code of Federal Regulation for the Department of Labor, which is 29. 29 is the Department of Labor title, 29 CFR. 1910 is the general industry standard, and 1200 is your hazardous communication standard within the general industry. So that 1200 F6 is saying that's where you could find the rule for secondary containers. The employer shall ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals in the workplace is labeled, tagged, or marked with either the information specified for the labels on the shipping container, meaning your GHS container, or a product identifier in your words, your pictograms. You could also use your old labeling system, your HMIS or NFPA label system in conjunction, but you need to train your employees that they're using both, that they're going to see GHS labels and the old labeling system at the same time. So either or this. That's what they're saying in that. So either or. So it's your secondary label. Secondary label means, or excuse me, the either or part is you're going to either switch 100% to your GHS or you're going to stay with your current labeling system. But the reason why your employees need to be trained on both is they're going to see GHS labeling coming in from outside your facility. And then once it gets inside your facility, then you use your labeling system, which is the if you choose to go with your same system. But it may get confusing. You might have to just go ahead and switch to GHS instead of using both on your secondary containers. Here's some labeling, and you'll see on the bottom here it's blank. You can't have blank sections anymore with your GHS labels. And this one doesn't have all the information on either label, so that's not a good label. This one does give you some pictograms. It tells you that it's a health hazard, but then it doesn't give you any of the other labeling information about warning. This says a danger in here, so that's your signal word, but it doesn't give you all your information, so you're missing some. There's your two different back-to-back views. You're used to seeing the severe hazard says 4. Now your severe hazards are going to be 1. So it's going to be a mindset shift for the American workers. I'm going to skip over here. That's where you see my next slide of the utility hazard. So I'm going to go down to there, skip right back up to the risk management section to finish up the risk management. And here are some of the anticipated benefits for the GHS. There'll be an internationally comprehensive plan, and it's supposed to enhance the protection of the human health and the environment. It provides a framework for all these different countries without an existing system. So some countries don't really have a way of labeling their chemicals, but now they incorporate the GHS system. They're using an international body to do all the work, basically, and then they'll tell them the hazard that's associated with the chemical they're trying to export. It's also going to facilitate the national trade of export and importing, because now there's no need to guess if the material that you're receiving from a different country is truly as hazardous or if it's benign, as they say. It may be something that could have been highly hazardous, but a label slapped on it that's not regulated that says now this chemical is not as highly hazardous, it's actually benign, and then come to find out workers get injured or ill because it is highly hazardous. They won't have that anymore because the GHS labeling and the GHS system will protect against that, and in return that is going to help facilitate international trade because now products can be trusted more. Reduce testing and evaluation against multiple classification system. So this is now, once you get a GHS classification on a chemical, it's going to start streamlining the process. So future application is the GHS system is really going to be streamlined, and it'll work better. Some of your other appendix, and C is an overview of whatever your chemical is. D is a overview of your process safety management with your review of your audit from a third party if you use one. And then E, that's a good appendix to add because that shows you right there in your process safety management and your risk management plans where your law is coming from. It's your Federal Register 40, Title 40 is environmental, Code of Federal Regulation, Part 68. So that's where it's coming from. So I'd like to thank you for watching this portion, the risk management, and I hope you learned a lot from what we've covered. We even covered a little section in the globally harmonized system, and that's another one of my trainings that I do. And in this Compliance Academy, you will see a section for that. So I enjoyed my time with you, and I hope from hearing from you. Let me know what you think about the presentation. And in the Compliance Academy, you can reach me at Sheldon@utilitycompliance.com. My number, toll-free in the U.S., is 888-398-0120. And Utility Compliance can help you with all your utility needs, including industrial pretreatment, risk management plans, as we went over, wastewater process control, and training for water treatment, wastewater treatment, and distribution system. So have a great day. I look forward to training with you either in person or on your next training that you do with Compliance Academy.